All right, everybody, welcome back to our SPI Doppler review series. And now that we've established the foundational principles of fluid dynamics and circulatory basics, we are ready to move one step deeper into how blood actually behaves inside the blood vessels. So, in this episode, we focus on phase 2, flow types. We'll examine laminar plug, pulsatile, disturbed, and turbulent flow, and more importantly, how each pattern influences the Doppler shifts that we measure. So understanding flow types is critical because Doppler doesn't just detect movement; it reflects the pattern of that movement. So when you can recognize how different flow profiles affect velocity distribution and spectral appearance, the SPI questions become far more predictable. So let's build on the foundation that we've already done and explore how blood truly moves. So now that we've reviewed the foundation, let's look at the full roadmap again. So we started with fluid basics, understanding what a fluid is, how blood behaves, and what creates movement in the first place. That foundation naturally brings us to flow types, which is our focus today. Once we know what makes blood move, the next question is, how does it move? Is it smooth and layered flat across the vessel, pulsing with the cardiac cycle, or chaotic and turbulent? These patterns directly shape what Doppler detects. From flow types, we transition into hemodynamics and equations, where we explain those patterns and how they occur and why they occur using continuity. So Pasquale's law and Bernoulli's to connect behavior to physics will also be explored. And with that understanding, we step into Doppler physics, where motion turns into frequency shifts. Then signal processing, where those shifts become spectral displays. Next, after that, is instrumentation, where we learn how system settings influence what we measure. And finally, clinical applications, where everything comes together in real diagnostic scenarios. So each phase builds logically on the one before it. And today we are firmly in phase 2, the flow types, the critical bridge between basic fluid principles and true Doppler mastery. So before we examine each flow pattern individually, let's frame what we're looking for. When we talk about flow types, we are really talking about how velocity is distributed within a vessel. So is the blood moving in organized layers? Is the speed the same across the lumen? Does it change during the cardiac cycle? Or does it break down into chaotic motion? So these differences in flow pattern directly influence the range of velocities present. And that range determines what we see on Doppler, especially on the spectral display. So as we move forward, think in terms of velocity profiles and organization versus disorganization of flow. And we'll begin with the most fundamental pattern, which is laminar flow. Okay, so the question here is, what type of blood flow demonstrates layers of fluid sliding over each other? And the options are A, plug, B, helical, C, distributed or disturbed, I'm sorry, and D, laminar. The writing is so small on the little screen there. And the correct answer is laminar. And so what does that mean? So laminar flow means that blood moves in smooth parallel layers, laminae, right? So the layer in the center moves the fastest. The layer closest to the vessel wall will move slower because of friction. The layers don't mix or swirl. They glide past one another smoothly. And think of it like a neatly stacked deck of cards sliding forward, where each layer moves, but they stay organized. This is the normal pattern of blood flow in straight, healthy vessels. Now let's look at why the other answers are not correct. And so A said plug flow. Plug flow is almost the opposite idea. So in plug flow, the velocity across the vessel is nearly the same everywhere. There isn't that layered, gradual change in speed from the center to the wall. It looks more like a solid plug moving forward instead of distinct layers sliding at different speeds. So while it's organized, it does not demonstrate layers sliding at different velocities, which is what the question is actually describing, is asking for. So the other answer, B, helical flow. So this is wrong because helical flow is spiral shaped. The blood moves in this particular pattern, it moves in a corkscrew pattern. So it has a rotational component. And this is not simple layered sliding. It involves twisting motion, so it doesn't match the definition given in the question. And the last answer that was incorrect was C, disturbed flow. And disturbed flow is just messy. It includes turbulence. There are what are called eddies and swirling. The layers break down and they mix, and that is the opposite of smooth layered movement. So the next question says, which flow type demonstrates a flow velocity that is essentially constant across the vessels? And the answers are A, plug, B, helical, C, laminar, or D, parabolic. And the correct answer here, if we learn from the last slide, is a plug. So again, plug flow demonstrates velocity that is essentially constant across the vessel. So what this means is that the blood in the center uh, and the blood near the walls, all of them are moving nearly at the same speed. The velocity profile looks almost flat across the diameter, like a solid plug moving forward. So this type of flow can occur, right? It occurs in large vessels, in high flow states, and in early in the systole of the aorta. Now, why the other answers are wrong? So if we look at B, which is helical flow means you have spirals through the blood vessel. It has rotational components. And so velocity varies throughout. So definitely not constant across the vessel. The next one is laminar. Remember we discussed laminar flow. These are smooth layers. They're fastest in the center. They're slowest at the walls. So velocity varies across the vessels, or it's not constant. And the last answer that's incorrect is parabolic. So parabolic flow is actually the classic laminar velocity profile, where you have the maximum velocity at the center and it gradually decreases towards zero at the walls. So it looks like a curved dome. It's not flat. So again, definitely not constant. So if you want to imagine this with a nice clear mental picture, imagine three flow profiles. The parabolic, which is like a curved dome shape, laminar, which is layered but still dome shaped, and then the plug, which is flat at the top. So the profile is flat at the top. Everything's moving at the same speed. So if it's flat across the vessel, it's plug flow. Okay, so the next question is, which type of blood flow would demonstrate the narrowed range of Doppler shift frequencies? And the answers are A, plug, B, laminar, C, parabolic, or D, disturbed. And the correct answer here is plug. So plug flow demonstrates the narrowest range of Doppler shift frequencies. And why? Because in plug flow, velocity is essentially the same across the entire vessel. All red blood cells are moving at nearly the same speed. So if velocity is uniform, Doppler shifts are nearly identical. So you have a very narrow spectral tracing, thin waveform, minimal spectral broadening. So let's look at why the other answers are incorrect, or not the most correct. So laminar, B. Laminar flow still has faster velocity in the center, slower velocity near the walls. So that means that multiple velocities at the same time. So you're going to have a wider range of Doppler shifts than plug. I don't know if you can see me move my hand. Parabolic, which is C. So parabolic flow is like classic laminar flow, maximum velocity at the center, zero velocity at the wall, and that's actually a wide, again, velocity range, so it produces more spectral spread than plug flow. And the last answer that was incorrect was disturbed flow. So disturbed flow introduces irregular velocities, velocity fluctuations. So that increases frequencies spread even more. So it's definitely not narrow. So if you think of a clean spectral Doppler link, velocity range across the vessel is frequency, which relates to the range of spectral tracing. When you have uniform velocity, that relates to narrow tracing. And when you have a wide velocity distribution, that leads to a broad tracing. And then plug is the most uniform, and it has the narrowest frequency range. Okay, so the next question on flow pattern is a non-steady flow with acceleration and deceleration over the cardiac cycle is what? And so answer A is plug flow, answer B is pulsatile flow, answer C is viscosity, answer D is laminar flow, and what should be answer E is parabolic flow. And so the correct answer in this case is pulsatile flow, and I'll tell you why. So pulsatile flow changes with time, and because the heart beats in cycles, blood accelerates during systole, blood decelerates during diastole, velocity rises and falls with each heartbeat. So it is non-steady, meaning it does not remain constant. If something varies over the cardiac cycle, your brain should immediately think pulsatile. So now let's eliminate the other answers. The first one was A, plug flow. Remember, plug flow describes a velocity profile across a vessel that doesn't change over time. So in plug flow, velocity is nearly uniform across the vessel. It does not describe acceleration, deceleration during the cardiac cycle. The question is about time variation, not cross-sectional velocity distribution. Answer C says laminar flow. So laminar flow describes smooth layered movement of fluid, parallel layers sliding past one another. So laminar flow can be steady or pulsatile, but laminar only describes organization of flow, not whether it changes with time. So it doesn't answer the non-steady part of the question. And the other answer, D, parabolic flow. So parabolic flow, again, describes the shape of the velocity profile in a vessel. So fastest in the center, slowest near the walls. It forms a parabola when it's graphed. Again, this describes spatial distribution, not changes over time. So the key distinction is that there are two different categories being tested here: spatial patterns across the vessel, laminar plug, parabolic, temporal patterns over time. Pulsatile, the question is clearly about time variation during the cardiac cycle. So the only answer that fits is pulsatile flow. The next question in flow patterns is turbulent flow is a form of blank flow. The answers are pulsatile, B, continuous, C, parabolic, and D, gases and liquids. So the correct answer is obviously non-laminar. So remember that laminar flow is equal to smooth, orderly, layered movement, and turbulent flow is equal to chaotic, swirling, mixing. So turbulent flow is literally the opposite of laminar flow. If it's not smooth and layered, it's non-laminar. So that's why the correct answer is non-laminar. In Doppler terms, laminar again also relates to narrow spectral windows, and turbulent, which is non-laminar, is reflective of spectral broadening. So A is incorrect because pulsatile flow describes variation over time, acceleration and deceleration during the cardiac cycle. Turbulence describes disorganized spatial flow patterns, not whether flow is steady or changing with time. So flow can be laminar, pulsatile in a normal artery, turbulent and pulsatile in a stenotic artery. So pulsatile is not the defining feature of turbulence. The B is incorrect because it's continuous, it says continuous, and continuous flow means steady flow, so no significant variation over time. Turbulence has nothing to do with whether flow is continuous or pulsatile. So you can have continuous laminar flow or continuous turbulent flows in extreme cases. So continuous does not define turbulence. And then the third answer is C, parabolic. So parabolic describes the velocity profile shape in laminar flow. Fastest in the center, slowest near the walls. So turbulent flow does not maintain a parabolic profile. The velocity pattern becomes irregular and mixed. So parabolic is actually associated with laminar flow, which is the opposite of turbulence. So the last question in this phase of study is, which type of blood flow demonstrates a chaotic flow pattern? And the answers are A, stenotic, B, disturbed, C, parabolic, and D, turbulent. So the correct answer here is turbulent. So remember, turbulent flow is the type of flow that demonstrates a chaotic flow pattern. Turbulent flow characterized by random velocity fluctuations, eddies and vortices, flow in multiple directions at the same time. There's a loss of organized layers. So instead of smooth layers sliding past each other, the blood is swirling unpredictably. So that's chaos, that's turbulence. So let's look at why the other answers are wrong. So A says stenotic. Stenotic flow occurs at a narrowing, so it may lead to turbulence downstream, but stenotic describes the location versus cause, not the flow pattern itself. So not all stenotic flow is chaotic. especially at the throat where velocity is highest but still organized. The next answer, B, disturbed. So again, disturbed flow is what? It's less organized than laminar. It may have mild irregularities, but it is not fully chaotic like turbulence. Think of disturbed as messy, but not wild. And then the next answer is C, parabolic. This is wrong because parabolic flow is classic laminar flow. Highest velocity in the center, lowest velocity near the walls, smooth velocity gradient. It's the opposite of chaotic. And so think of this in a mental flow hierarchy. So laminar, again, smooth, parabolic, smooth dome-shaped profile, disturbed, irregular, but not chaotic, turbulent, chaotic, and random. So the question asks chaotic. So it's always turbulence. And with that said, I think that's the last question, like I said, for this part of the study series. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on phase 3.